Good afternoon. I am Amitabh Varshney, Dean of the College of Computer Mathematical and Natural Sciences and a Professor of Computer Science. It's a pleasure for me to welcome all of you to the Fall 2025 Dean's Distinguished Lecture with DJ Patil. DJ is a double science terp, and he worked in applied mathematics with our dear friend Jim Yorke and the late Eugenia Calais. It has been almost a decade since he last came here to give a talk in 2016 while he was the US Chief Data Scientist in the Obama administration working at the Office of Science and Technology Policy. During this time, a lot of things have changed, including the rise of AI and the associated tools and technologies that allow the non-experts to use and build AI tools. So it's always very fun talking with DJ and hearing his insights. But before we do that, I also want you to take a moment to thank Dr. Mohammed Naeem Delhi for sharing his classroom with all of us. And I would like to thank Professor Dan Lathrop for inviting DJ here and organizing his visit. So without further ado, I would like to now turn things over to Dan to introduce our speaker. Thank you.
So first a show of hands. So who knows or has met Jim Yorke? Just out of curiosity. Okay, wow, okay, that's a pretty good interaction. So, real pleasure to welcome DJ Patil. I asked DJ if he might talk to us about how AI could influence our teaching, learning, and student careers, because we're in a time of change, and many of us thinking about that. So DJ has an extraordinary impact on thinking about data and science policy, as Amitabh said, U.S. Chief Data Scientist under President Obama, and help shape how data could be used for public good. So DJ once said, data science uses data to solve problems. I believe that it's a team sport. When we come together, we can do powerful things with data. He also reminds us, move purposefully and fix things. So these two ideas, collaboration and action, really stand out in my mind. They get at why data science matters and why it still depends on human judgment and creativity. So please join me in welcoming DJ.
How's that audio? All right, great. So, Dan, thank you for donating your class time. Apologies to students who I guess are supposed to be using this time for review for the midterm. Hopefully I'll make it worthwhile. Since I'm coming back, it is actually a real joy to be back on campus. This is where many of the initial ideas for data science actually were formulated. It actually started off, and there's a number of people here who I just have to thank. The first is Brian Hunt, who is my formal Ph.D. advisor, and we started working on these crazy ideas around weather data and time series and asking, is the weather as chaotic as it could? Patrick O'Shea used to share his wisdom and IRE, and thinking about things that I didn't have any idea knowing what they were about in terms of the experimental side. Luke Patora was incredibly influential in helping me think about different ideas in the way AI was going to work, also how to think about it with applications to national security. Wolfgang Loser and his team, as they were just spinning up and thinking about the bio side. And of course, Ed On, who was quite essential in teaching me actually how to be able to not only be a communicator, but a scientist and a thinker of depth overall. I think I caught everybody I worked with. No, it's not even on. It's just loud naturally. That's what my kid would say. Guys, you project. I project.
Well, all right. There we go. Wow, that's now really loud. Maybe I'll try to be a little less loud there. So maybe what I thought would be helpful is to just talk through some of the things that I see that are happening in the world of AI right now, the state of AI, and really to think about some of the conversations that we've had today and throughout as I see what's transforming across the country, around the world, in curriculum design, and also specifically how to think about the hardening of your careers and futures given this technology change. And so maybe I'm just going to whip through a bunch of stuff that some of you may have seen, some of you probably may not have been exposed to, but this is really a Silicon Valley-centric view of the world of what we see happening with AI right now, or we're in the epicenter of the development of these things. And the first is something I think we all know. The models have gotten good because we're using them that much more. But the part to emphasize is how much better they've gotten. You know, when it used to be, everything used to look like a zombie with 7 fingers or maybe 3 thumbs and all sorts of weirdness to the photorealistic. But it's really quickly moved on to video. And the parts there, just even in the last couple days or the last week alone, we've seen multiple videos be uploaded and be propagated by news and other places where people can't tell if it's AI generated or not. We're fully in that phase. And we're getting into the place where the physics is starting to actually look very real to people, and they can't actually discern even the physics from things like spaghetti. In terms of the models and the average, you know, sort of how good is it relative to humans, we have all these kind of charts that we look at as like, hey, here's the average human baseline. We're like, look, it's really good on these tests. We come up with these tests like it's better than a doctor because it's able to pass this exam. It's all these other things. I find that not a useful way, and I think we've really actually moved beyond this as this being the assessor of how good a model is. We started to shift to these other type of new model assessors. This is the MMMU experiment. This is you know, the type of questions that you might get in the different categories. Maybe this is bringing back trauma for some of the students for SAT land. You know, there's like, or GRE students. You know, like, this is like the medical one. We'll say that's hard. We'll say this math one here. This is easy. These are hard. You know, we can give it these tests. But the measure that I think has actually been more interesting is from this professor, Po Shen, Carnegie Mellon. He did the classic thing I think many of the faculty did here, is he put all his tests and midterms into the system and then came away realizing like, wait, GPT-01 got a perfect score on his CMU undergrad exams across the board. And so has to think about what is this, what is the new form of this look like? But what's the shift that's happened, this was last year, and this year alone, the other thing about Po Shen is Po Shen was the first coach of the United States U.S. Olympiad team, the first time in 2015 to help the U.S. get returned back to gold medal status in 2015. Actually, I got to be the person that welcomed the team to the White House and celebrate their win. And the thing that is special about this is every year since we've seen the deployment of these these models, we've seen it do better and better on the Math Olympiad tests. Last year, it did really well and got a bunch of silvers. This year, it solved 5 out of the 6 problems. The key portion of it, the part that was especially interesting about it, is that in that case, the speed at which it solved the model, the problems, as well as the complexity. And we expect the models to solve all 6 problems, not just in the next year, but we should expect it over the next few months at the speed at which these things are evolving. And so it's the evolution of the models that we also see is one of these spectacular, unique things on all of this front. And then as a result, customer adoption has really followed. 10% of the world's population is currently using an AI chat interface like ChatGPT or one of those. So we're at 10% already. These products, the time to reach the first 1 million users, Netflix took about 3.5 years. We don't actually even put LinkedIn on this chart when we were building it because it took us so many years to get to 1 million users. ChatGPT was 5 days. Before that, Instagram, 75 days, Spotify, 5 months. And something they don't talk about is the reason these guys grew so fast is because they were sitting on top of the infrastructure, really the virality of Facebook and Twitter was really why that growth went so fast. But ChatGPT's growth is very organic that way. And so it's taken off. And the adoption for new models and new ways that the technology can be used is matching that growth rate pace. What about on industry? And it's because the natural question, that's consumer. In industry, one of the things that this is a company called Ramp. They're think of it as a financial payment system for companies. And what they are able to see is through all those transactions. And they have a cool blog post about that they put out there with all sorts of data insights. And one of those is how much people are spending inside these companies on AI products. And what you see is that of their population, of their share of US businesses, about 43% are using and adopting paid subscriptions to AI models. The reason this is particularly important, especially what we're seeing right now with federal data, is we don't have access to federal data right now, not just because of the government shutdown, but because of a broad policy shift of what it means to share data and lots of questions around the quality of the data and undermining many of those assessments. And so right now the government estimate's only at 9.2. That delta tells us a lot about what you hear in the news, what we're seeing in industry, and what we see through other ways of discerning the actual adoption rates on data. Take Waymo. Dan's son works on problems like this and other. So Waymo, one of the things I want to call this out, even though a lot of this initially was computer vision, obviously using large language models nowadays, is the number of miles that have been driven with a rider only. And so in Phoenix, these are already outdated. It's probably closer to 50 million miles right now in Phoenix. It's well over 30 million miles in San Francisco. These are rider only. The power of this, though, is how much safer on many dimensions these cars have been in terms of less injuries, less airbag deployments, hard braking, other type of measures compared to the average driver. Why did this stuff take off? It's not just like it's an overnight success like some of the large language models. This has been over a decade of hard work. But part of what the people don't understand or see about this, why Phoenix? Why was Phoenix first? During our time in the Obama administration, one of the things was to give out grants to cities to transform, to redevelop their infrastructure, to allow connected cities to have much more digitization take place. They spent a lot of that money effectively changing, refactoring the environment around Phoenix to make it easier for self-driving cars to work. And so we changed the way society was actually designed around this. This would be the equivalent of, in the horse and buggy era, cars show up and you're like, oh wait, we need a different infrastructure. We need stop signs, we need stoplights. The width of the roads can change, all of that. That gave them the base training set that then was allowed to use it in more complicated environments that have not changed, like San Francisco. I do need to point out there have been a number of both comical and very potentially other issues around Waymo and others. Cruise, a competitor, hit a woman, dragged her in San Francisco, causing severe bodily injuries. Waymo recently had 2 issues in the last month. 3 issues. One was it was going up to a DIU checkpoint, DUI checkpoint, and it's decided that it saw the flashing lights and decided to do a U-turn and run away. I am not making this up, and this is actually near the town I live in, and so the police chased after it. I guess they had not, for whatever reason, hadn't seen a Waymo. They chased after it and they pulled it over. And then there is no checkbox in California currently that you can check to say autonomous vehicle. There will be in the next coming year, but at this time you cannot give a Waymo a ticket. It also just recently ignored the flashing lights of a bus for kids getting out of a car, boarding a school bus. It just recently ignored those. And just yesterday it hit and killed a cat. And so there are still edge cases here, but the part here that is really the adoption, the rapid adoption of this technology, and some of the surprising metrics that we see in the technology. As I mentioned, not everything is awesome. Not everything is that great, and it's important to call this out. This was put out in the last couple weeks. This is a self-harm and suicide report put out by OpenAI. Part of the reason we believe they put this report out is there's new California legislation that was signed into law that will go into effect that says all these AI companies actually have to report about a degree of self-harm. The part I want to emphasize in here, and you can't see this, maybe you can over there on the top, is that in the current model of all the conversations it has, about 0.05% of messages contain explicit or implicit indicators of suicidal ideation or intent. So 0.05%. Well, their answer on this is, see, that's a small percent. However, if you just throw this into ChatGPT and you ask it, hey, based on how many active users are there in a week, if 0.15% of, like how many is that? It would be 700 million weekly active people are asking ChatGPT about something around self-harm or suicide ideation. 1 million people plus a week, and given the usage, the population growth on ChatGPT is still going up, that means that number is going to go up. What product would we ever allow created that would be able to say, collateral damage is 1 million people? That's a real policy question. That's a real issue. The bigger problem is the dismissive nature of saying it's not just that big of a problem. And so you're starting to hear for the first time in the last month, are these products, are these companies too big to fail? Is this technology too big to fail? And so we've sort of said, we're not going to pull this back. We don't know how to deal with it. And so the way I would frame it is, what is Silicon Valley's approach on this? Is YOLO. It's just literally go faster, go faster, go faster on some of these things. Because if you go faster, anytime you try to put the regulatory framework in, it's not going to be as aggressive. We've seen other issues like on Grok being anti-Semitic, racist in other cases, those type of issues, and that leads to some of the questions around legislation. As I mentioned, federal policy is effectively all gas, no brakes. This was done with ChatGPT. I'm surprised it left the steering wheel in, because that is current federal policy. That is the way it was going. During the Biden administration, it was all brakes, very, very minimal gas was the approach. As a result, we're seeing a constellation of legislation across the entire United States. All the states have their different patchwork, and so this is going to make it an absolute mitigated disaster to try to figure out how do you match and solve for all of this. What it does do is it gives extraordinary power to the bigger players, because the biggest players will have the ability to manage this. New upstarts will not have the ability to manage these efforts. I'll also mention it's still very, very early. I say this as a product builder and as an investor, it's still very early in this game. And here's one of the things. In 2016, Jason Furman, Ed Felton, a number of us all wrote this report on AI, automation, and the economy. Ed really drove it, the majority of this. And part of this, as a first strategy, the way this came about was people were talking about AGI is going to happen. It's going to cause the world to end. We need to do something about it right now. And so President Obama called us up and said, hey, what are you guys doing about this? And we said, okay, well, we'll take a look at it. We'll try to see what's going on. This is a time period where AlphaGo from DeepMind had just beaten the best Go players. And so we took a look at it and we said, look, here's the arc of some of this technology. This is pre-Gen AI. This is really deep learning. And wow, there's a lot of good stuff happening, some challenges. He came back to us and said, I don't think you guys get it. It's not what you want to hear a president say to you. And we said, we don't get it. What do you mean by that? You're like, this is Ed Felton. This is like, these are real people who've done a lot of work on this space. And what he pointed out was the broader trend of disruption and populism that was starting to emerge in 2016, and what the implications of technology might be to that. And so that's what kicked off this effort to say, well, let's look at the broader aspects of automation and the economy together in this. And when we looked at that, one of the first things we said is, what's at risk? What jobs are at risk? And we said, oh, it's going to be the short line cooks flipping hamburgers. It's going to be truck drivers, all those aspects. And guess what? Those are totally wrong. Why are they wrong, though? They're wrong for a couple reasons. One is Moore's Law benefits software, chips, those aspects. Motors, actuaries, material sciences do not follow Moore's Law. They don't double every few years. So that's one problem. The second is the infrastructure to rebuild to allow those systems to work, like in the case of Phoenix, Arizona, requires a lot more dollars. And so you have to rebuild everything from scratch. And those portions also hold back what could potentially be done in these ecosystems. And so since then, the part that I would emphasize as we think about these things is you can't just think about what the raw technology can do. It's the other 2% of the problem that really catches you and prevents this from being implemented. And we'll talk a little bit about that in healthcare. I just mentioned also models. We have no longer one big model rule them all. But I'll go with this other portion just real quick, is that we have a Maslow's hierarchy of needs typically, that there's this Maslow's hierarchy. Similarly, we have one for AI. Data at the bottom, power and water, compute infrastructure, models, and then the big one that actually isn't talked about as much is the user feedback cycle, the ability to learn, the ability to understand what's actually taking place. And then as a result, we see new paradigms emerging. So where are my students at? How many of you guys are using AI today? All right, pretty much almost 100%. So this is what I would call, how many first years we have? That's right, Reza, you're a second year now. You moved on. How many second years? Third years? Fourth years? All right, so guess what? None of you are AI native. You're more likely to be AI fluent. AI native is just graduating. Why do we say that? Why do we know that? Because when we looked at this, and what do I mean by AI native? Think of this as like phones. When we saw phones first come out, we saw the difference in usage between kids who were truly mobile native in their usage of the phones versus those that sort of adopted these technologies. The ones that grabbed on this, and we saw this with Google, we saw this with the internet, all of these groups that were there, they were really just emerging from high school as the technologies had become robust enough to use. And so the students, those of you that are in your undergrad here, in your first through fourth year, you're really trying to be here and make sure you are truly AI native. And the hope isn't lost. You get to become AI native, but you really have to embrace the technologies and really use it. And for all the parents, you know what mobile native is versus non-mobile native, because every time you start doing something on your phone, your kid takes it from you and then starts to just say, let me do that, it's faster. And my kids do this all the time, and then I say, well, I built that product. We invented that technology. They're like, oh, Dad with his invented the internet thing again. What'd you build, LinkedIn? Who uses that? That's for old people. So, and then part of this is where we see this in companies all the time. We've had this conversation, this gets to the curriculum in the classroom. Well, companies today are attempting to be AI, and then they'll say something like, no using AI. No using AI for coding, no using AI in the classroom. What's the right model for this? How do you ensure good code if you're using it for software developers? If you're using it in the curriculum, how do you ensure people are really learning? This is one of the hardest problems today for what it's going to create and what's going to come in society, in my opinion. And so what I mean by that is take something like vibe coding. Vibe coding being this idea that you can use the AI products just to build an app or do something very simple. Like the one I've built is for the woman down the street who takes care of dogs. She equivalent babysit, dog watches, walks the dogs, and she's terrible about keeping track of what everyone owes. And so every month you're like, how much do I owe you? And she's like, I gotta go try to calculate. She's like, was the dog here this day? I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna quickly code up an app for you through these AI systems, and you get it for free. And so we're seeing more and more versions of that, of non-traditional people. I meet small, medium business people that are vibe coding the craziest stuff that I never would have imagined. And they're using it to get, market intelligence, understand what's happening with the competitors, all these things in these really unique ways. And even though this is a tongue-in-cheek image produced by AI, it is not far from the truth from my conversations of people where I'm like, really, that works for you? They're really using it. But we see it also inside that what we refer to as a shadow IT, is that you have somebody who's got a job. Their job is like, they're up against they actually need to do something. They can't get time from developers or the engineers, and so they just kind of do it themselves, and they're able to kind of solve a problem. This is no different than how Dropbox originally took off, is through the shadow IT efforts, is they just kind of said, hey, you need to move files, your IT team prevents you from doing your job, no worries. We'll let you do it through, we'll just help you do this through our systems. And then a new one that we're starting to realize is, hey, with these systems, and normally I might hire a set of engineers, it might cost me $1 million, $2 million to hire that team and do something. Well, if I have this system do it, I'm not afraid to throw away the code. I can use it once, maybe twice, and then we get rid of it. And so we're seeing the new patterns emerge around this of, well, what does it look like inside the business, the organizations, academia, nonprofits, other places, government, where we say it's okay to throw away code. We don't have to have it perfect, but we just need to get it to work for us. The paradigm that I use right now and that I think we see is we're on a lake. What's thick ice? What's thin ice? I can't tell you what's thick ice and what's thin ice. That's how hard it is right now. A lot of times we put out technology, we'll use the AI systems. It looks like it's on thick ice, and then we'll try to implement it. I spend a lot of time trying to implement this in healthcare and particularly the clinical environment. And it looks awesome at first, and then it totally breaks. It just does not work at scale or across a number of different areas. And so what we say is we have a lot of 80% solutions, and when you put a bunch of 80% solutions together, we get a solution that really will piss off everybody. That's the technical way. But here's what I think is about to happen, and this is a challenge for us, not only here in academia, but in society. So this is my rate of change framework. I think about big companies release products once a year. So that's a 1x. They're on a 1x cycle. Your iPhone comes out once a year. Big developer release software updates once a year. Some of them every couple of years. Very rarely from a big company do you get something multiple times a year. Security updates do not count here. But it's one time a year. What do startups typically release at? They're at 3 times a year. That's like the goal, 3 major releases a year. If we get to 3 major releases a year, we're on an exponential in terms, we're gonna catch up and probably beat the big company because they're never gonna be able to keep up with us. What do AI companies release at? Currently 7 to 10x. Currently 7 to 10x. But here's the kicker. What does company culture change at? 0.1x. What does society change with regards to legislation? That is every 20 to 30 years, 0.02x. We're talking right now in society right now about cultural change and the culture wars and society's transforming too fast. And I'm like, well, we're transforming on that cycle and you're concerned about that? Well, guess what's coming with the disruption at you with this time scale? And this is the epitome of what President Obama was talking about then, is like, hey, this rate of change that we're about to see creates all sorts of unintended consequences, other type of issues in society that are going to be far more reaching and problematic. And what we're thinking about with this technology is, wow, how amazing it is, but the limiting factor for what's happening. And the question for us from a policy perspective, a product perspective, an academic perspective, is what are we in for as a society? One, we could be in for a hard landing. Like it's gonna be really rough, major market disruptions, economic downfall, populism, civil unrest, all these type of things in a hard landing. We might have a soft landing. We might be able to land the plane. We'll have worker compensation programs. We'll be able to retrain people, get them into other directions, but that takes a lot of investment to get that correct. Or is this gonna be an opportunity? is an opportunity to really leverage this technology and carry us into a techno-optimist world. It's probably all three, depending on the populations. We know that there's a digital divide in technology access to populations already. We'll probably see that version too. And so we might have a hard landing for certain groups. We may have opportunities only for certain populations and groups. But this is the question of like part of with all the technology that I really think we need to focus on and think about. So, and I'll just say a quick word on this for healthcare. So Devoted Health is the company which I've been working on for the last 9 years. We take care of senior citizens in parts of the country that most people ignore. They fly over states, other areas. Our members are quite sick, quite poor, neglected. We are not only their insurer, we're their payer, for those that know that terminology in healthcare. We are also their provider of care. We take care of them. We have our own medical group and all of those aspects. We have, one of the biggest challenges we have right now is there are no more primary care physicians. Our primary physician capacity is constrained. The ability to find a doctor, to keep that doctor, is extremely limited. So for me to do a good job of controlling the cost of healthcare, I have to get more of those doctors, and I have to have them see more people without burning out. So I can't just say, hey, you only get 3 minutes per person. I have to use technology to find new ways to do that. And so we are actively in that process to say, what does it mean to do that in a clinical setting? Right now, one of the most powerful things that we've had out of data science and the big data wave is to find signal in the noise. How many cases do we have of big data and AI being used in healthcare to benefit the patient? We have scientific papers, we have examples, but near zero examples. All of the innovations of data science and AI have gone to two fields in particular. Two fields. Number one, helping payers and insurance companies, like the payers are insurance companies, and hospital groups make a ton more money. The second is advertising. Those are the two spots where we've made massive amounts of impact on society with data and big data and data science. So the promise of this with AI is to take those lessons to ask, how are we actually going to benefit people? How do we actually make those technologies work? And the line actually that is really still resonated with me is what President Obama had told us, said, hey, as you guys are thinking about this technology, how do you ensure it's going to work for us rather than against us? And when he says us, he means all Americans. What does that look like? And I think that gets to the fundamental challenge. And so as we think about AI in academia, this would be my statement. This is hard, sorry, Dad. This is really hard what you're up against and what to think about. What are these roles? What are the things that are going to be doing? And this can't just be done by academia. For the students, you have a voice in this. This is your training ground. It has got to be a we effort. This is a team sport to figure out, and you should have a seat at the table to try to say, what is it that you believe you need? And help make sure that it is a holistic aspect, because you're living with the tech. You're the ones that are going to be inheriting all of this world to take us forward. Here's what I tell students. As I mentioned, become AI native the best you can, if not fully native, and then repeat, because right now, every couple of years, you're going to have to relearn it again. Like, it is just being on the regular cycle. But guess what? What is the best place to train you how to become that? Like, to get this learning cycle? It's places like University of Maryland. It's where I did it. That's how I've been able to reinvent myself constantly as this technology evolves and keeps changing. It's places, it's your network, it's all of those aspects that come together here. The second is what I'd call the sideways E versus the T is greater than the T. For a lot of times people said, hey, you should have a lot of breadth and a singular depth. Be really deep in one thing. Yes, and two more. Be multidisciplinary. Part of the reason I came to University of Maryland, in addition to Ed, Brian, Jim, Eugenia, many of the others, was this is a place, one of the very few places in the country that is truly multidisciplinary. You can wander around between departments. You can have 4 Ph.D. advisors. People may think you're a little weird, but you can just show up. I took my qualifiers in meteorology, but then also was doing all this stuff with math, and also coding on the side. People are like, great, that sounds cool. The more you can be interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, you get to float between worlds. And that is what carries you forward. Some of the biggest lessons that I learned here at Maryland, I remember in our chaos colloquium, we had somebody came in about epidemiology and was talking about, I didn't know anything about that, learned a ton about it. A few years later, I never thought I'd be in Central Asia trying to figure out how to secure bioweapon stockpiles. And then a number of years later, helping run California's COVID response. Where did it start? It started in that colloquium, just being exposed to this whole thing called R0. And I was like, what's that? Now everyone is an armchair epidemiologist after COVID. But those little things get that multidisciplinary. So when you get dropped into another situation, you're gonna know and have some familiarity with it. And you can't just have, your familiarity can't just be, hey, deep learning, deep research on your favorite AI product to get you up to speed. You have to have a runway in there. And so let me give you 3 specific lessons I learned from campus. Clever beats smart 9 times out of 10. Clever beats smart 9 times out of 10. This is our adage for building things, is I never was the smartest student. I was by far from the smartest student. We had lots of great people who were deep, deep thinkers, people I incredibly respect, a lot of my closest friends. And I realized I wasn't gonna be the smartest guy, but I sure could be clever in my approaches. Could I find unique data sets? Could I find places where the problems people hadn't thought about? When we think about innovation, this is one of our key mantras in how to build all the different startups that we've worked on. Whether it's LinkedIn, Figma, you name it. We focus on clever. Clever is how we get to what we call product market fit. We figure out what we should do, and then once we figure that out, how do we scale it? That's when we bring smart in. We bring smart in once we're close to the problem. And so our iteration speed is too clever. Smart is what we do when we depth. Jim told me this one time when we were working late at night. We were walking to just take a walk, and he said, I remember asking him, saying, what's the type of project, how do we choose our projects? And he said, we work on cornerstone projects that allow everyone else to build. We put the first stone in that everyone else builds a foundation on. And that was some of my greatest learning, was like, once I looked at that, and I talked to Brian and Ed about it, and they said, of course, that's kind of like how we do things. We work on those kind of big projects. Because if you do that, you're building a new house always. And everything you go on and you build a new house, and then you build a new house. And that's how you change things. But work on cornerstone projects. I also make sure never work alone, personally. I never try to work alone. I always try to work as a team, to the old African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And then something that I really learned here is that your work doesn't matter if you can't communicate the value of it. We do great work, but we don't communicate the value of it. Like, what's the real value? I remember, just because Ed's here, I'll tell the story. It was like, I remember we were writing a paper, and I would bring my writing in, and Ed would take it and would cross out the words and then rewrite all of it. And I remember saying one time, I remember telling him, saying, my goal is to come in here one time and to have one line not changed. So the next time, the whole paper was crossed out except for one line. But the part that people don't realize is like getting your ass kicked like that by someone of that caliber, getting your ass kicked every day in a very kind, thoughtful way was the greatest training I had. People always ask, like in the White House, like, where did you learn to write? How could you communicate these ideas so clearly? Like I tell you, when you're in the back of a military jet and having to explain issues to the public while complex issues are taking place, you better have that nailed. People ask, like, where did you learn that? Did you learn that in Silicon Valley? No. I learned that here working on nonlinear dynamics and chaos theory. That's where I learned it from. And so as we think about what is happening with this AI transformation, what are the things that harden you? These are the kind of the core things that have been with me throughout time as we've evolved through multiple technology, from Web 1.0 to Web 2.0 to the cloud environments taking place, to mobile taking place, to data science, through big data, through machine learning, and now into AI. This has stayed hardened and has been central to the core themes of every single thing that I've built and worked on. And that's it. And then Dan, I think we'll trade some notes here. Should we stand, sit? What do you want?
So we have ample time for questions and microphones. And this is going on.
Yeah. I assure you, you're not going to ask me anything harder than a congressional testimony.
So,
yeah, Reza. Hi.
As a student, how do we increase our breadth or like sideways knowledge?
Yeah, great question. So how do you increase your breadth and knowledge if you're an undergrad in class? You know, here's one of the greatest things, although I found this might not be fully true, is like, I used to just literally, I used to just go sit in random classes. I used to just be like, I have no business being in this class, and I would just go sit in on it. I would go to literally different colloquia around campus. This was when I was an undergrad at UCSD, University of California, San Diego. I would just go into things, and then the first week of class, where things aren't as crazy, you could just sit in the back and try to absorb a little bit and hang on until you don't understand anything anymore. And some of the advice I would get from people, one of the things I did there's a lot of great colleagues from math department here. One of the things I did early on when I got here is I went to all the math faculty I could convince to talk to me, and I said, what does it mean to be a good mathematician? And they gave me a list, and their list they overlapped, but they were not the same. And I was like, oh, this is the master list. So I at least should not be stupid on these things. I should know what these things mean and what they are. And so a bunch of that stuff I didn't have time to take in the curriculum, so I just would audit them. I just would go there and do those things. And then the other portion that I would just emphasize, especially for those people in STEM, take as much liberal arts as you possibly can. Take as much liberal arts as you possibly can. If there's one thing that is guaranteed to be hardened in the future age, it is all those things. And what I see over and over again with the students that I work with is the students that have that liberal arts training and that background are able to reach for something that other people don't have in the building phase of products and other things. Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn, we had to debate deep ethical issues all the time for LinkedIn about should we sell our data, do we do things. He basically would have gone and done his Ph.D. in a doctorate in philosophy had LinkedIn not worked out. But we were able to have those debates and discussions because I had taken a bunch of philosophy through a seminar that I had no right to belong in, but was with a bunch of grad students as an undergrad and just would show up. And I learned a bunch of, I read a lot of Karl Popper, who's a very influential philosopher on science. And so just do those things. And then the other thing I would say is if you see something crazy as an experience, take it. If it's like, hey, you're gonna go out and drive around in the desert, driving around a research vehicle for a period of time just to learn how sand dunes are formed, great, go do that. You're gonna go chase whales, great, go do that. Go do something, go sit with patients in a clinical environment, great, do that. Help out in a food pantry, great, do that. Find ways to do random things that are gonna give you a huge amount of surface area of experience and that is gonna distill over time into ways that you could use your other skills to help out in those areas.
So two logistical things. One is it's microphones mid-aisle on both sides, so people with questions, probably if they go to the mics, I'll help organize it. Second thing is we have a hard stop at 3 and a car coming at 3:05. Yeah. So now's the time to ask questions, not afterwards, please. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jessica, a Ph.D. student on reliability working on social biases in language models. So my question, I wanted to really pull on the thread that you talked about how we need to make AI for everyone broadly. So I guess what are your thoughts on how we actually accomplish that, either in policy or as developers?
Yeah, this is a great question. I didn't intentionally try to dodge it because it's like multi-days of conference. This is really tough. And I think it's tough because it's gotten politicized. Let's just be honest, like if you look at the executive order out of the Trump administration on AI, it talks about woke systems. And you're like, what's that? What's that even mean? What does bias, that form of bias mean in these aspects? One of the things I think that has also become very problematic is the teams, there's two issues. The teams that were around alignment or safety were teams that basically were saying, stop everything. You can't do anything without this. And so as a result, soon as the political winds changed, those teams were jettisoned. And because people said, look, they're slowing us down, we can't afford it, why, like this is our moment to go. And so they lost politically inside the organizations. The better approach, and what I advocated to them, was you have to always be constructive. What Airbnb did when they were trying to figure out how to do this, they actually embedded lawyers into each product team, each engineering team, embedded there. They became this new kind of product legal team, product council is what they called them, as a way to kind of make it more of a mind meld rather than one team sitting off culturally on their own, only thinking about doomsday stuff, and another team thinking about very positive stuff. And so that's what I mean by that collective we. I think one of the things I would advocate now is we need a pretty fresh reset on thinking, because it's become so poisonous and toxic. We can't get even people in the same room to talk about these things well. There's very likely we'll have a major incident. We saw with the character AI suicide recently that has kind of reframed things. I think some of this is going to be there. Legislation, maybe at the state level. But what I think is there is, if you want to solve these things from that perspective, jump in on the side as a builder, and then once you own the product roadmap, steer it. One thing that people don't realize at LinkedIn, I was able to pull the product in certain directions, not because it was the right thing just to do, because I owned it. And so I said, oh, you know what? These are the right things to implement. I'm signing up for very serious metrics, but I'm ensuring these safeguards in place because I have enough power inside the company to ensure it. And then the far extreme, start something. Just show it what it is. And I think that's the version that we'll see take off.
Please.
Hi, I'm Ryan Duncan, and I'm wondering, how do you balance, or how should we balance efforts to become AI native while also being aware of and acknowledging the impacts it has on, say, the environment, society, on art, things like that?
Yeah, so it's familiarity. I think it's foremost. I think we're in a space right now where it's unclear what it means to collectively say save. Like we could recycle. We know what to do on certain things there. Here we don't know what that means around power, these type of things. The best thing that I think we can do on power, energy, climate, these things, we have to ask a lot more questions. We have to demand answers. Collective action here by asking questions is probably the best advocacy that we can have to empower the customer or to have those issues. So far, it's starting to work. It is really starting to work. The companies are paying attention. They know they need to address this. They need to do this. But I'll also point out some of the things that people don't always see. The biggest limiter in data center build out, it's not power or water, it's sand. Because without sand, you can't mix concrete. And without concrete, you don't have a data center. So it's not waterproof. We're running into these other really strange issue sets. But the part that I think is there is and this is a version I think we've seen with other types of technology, is if you opt out, you have opted out of your seat at the table. And don't allow someone to take away your seat at the table. You have to find a way to get a seat at the table and have voice and agency to advocate your perspective.
Thank you.
Please.
Hi, I'm Jason Kahn in chemistry. My question is, you showed a graph with all of the lines of AI performance basically converging on human performance.
Yeah.
So what does the next half of that panel look like?
Yeah, so those metrics are not what I'd call quite the right metrics. These are actually from the HAI at Stanford produced this produced this, and it's kind of like there's a sort of human baseline across these tests, but what as a result we've had to say these are the wrong tests for these things. We have to get to a new form. I gave this example a couple times earlier today, which is, there's a first wow factor when we deploy these technologies. So for example, the first time you use ChatGPT, you're like, this is magical, this is amazing. I'm using ChatGPT, sub in your favorite AI product in there. No preference on one or the other. What we see now is once after somebody's used it for a bit, they become far more nuanced in their usage. So in the clinical setting, I say, hey, I'm going to summarize a patient's records, medical records, might be 1,000 pages long. I have 1,000 characters to give to the physician in there. The first time they see it, they're like blown away. Like literally their minds are blown. They're like, I didn't know you could do this. The third time, literally the third time I show it to them, that they're like, could you do a little bit better? And they're like, yeah, I know the person's sick. Thanks. Yeah, they might have a chance of stroke. Duh. They're like, there's a bunch of stuff you're like, okay, yeah, we got to do better. We don't know how to evaluate. We're still very much in the early phase of doing this. The version that I was saying is like in the days of Yahoo search versus Google search. Yahoo search was just like a smattering. You're like, how many pages do I have to tab through to this? And then Google was like, oh, look, there's PageRank. Here's an ordered list that we actually has relevancy, and then we came up with new metrics like skip scores, other things, pskip, other type things that helped us then evaluate. So I think we're entering a phase now of what we might call the verticalized approach. The version like on radiology is it's not about what it does to the image, it's the end-to-end workflow time period with patient outcomes. Did AI truly assist here in the full workflow process to help us actually get to a right decision? That's a different, weirder kind of measuring because it doesn't just measure model performance, but it measures a combination of potentially models, so other scenarios to solve the overall problem. And so you're gonna see a much bigger migration to this over the next year because the question that's being asked in the boardroom is, when is this going to hit the bottom line? Is this going to save? It's costing us pennies right now. It's not costing us dollars. It's pennies on the big scope of things. Towards the end of 2026, I think we'll start seeing savings of pennies. But you're not going to see savings of dollars for a couple years out, probably, because of that cultural change, all the other systems. And then saving dollars requires a different framework around the models and what it means to be better than a human, because it's taken out of that sort of that context and put into like a set of complex tasks and edge cases that need to be solved inside the business environment.
So please.
Hi, my name is Shrikar, and while you were addressing about being AI native, right, a question that always pops onto my head is while programming or while writing papers or anything in general, I often tend to use GPT or AI for its help, but then while I'm offloading a certain part of these complex tasks to it, I always question, am I losing my ability by not going through the pain of developing it and then losing the skill or the craft of things, right?
So the answer is yes. I hate to say it, no pain, no gain. Literally, you need like someone like a Brian Hunt or an Ed Ott to be like just showing you, like raising the bar for you. So I will use, to ensure I also don't create my own AI laziness, I will do plenty of like outlining, thinking about stuff on my own. I'll put it through your AI system just to get a sense of it. I always do my writing first by myself. Always, because it's the grind, it's the process grind that gets you to the right answer. I'm a firm believer of this. The place you see more and more of this is people are realizing, like, if you take vibe coded stuff, it all looks the same. The design elements, it's not interesting. It's not going to survive in a consumer marketplace, if you will. What does work, though, is when people sort of feel touch. I'll be very specific. In photography and in cinema right now, there's a whole art of taking camera lenses and stripping off the coating because stuff is too perfect. And there's a resurgence in film photography because people are going like, hey, I don't know how to trust what's real. But film has a different taste, if you will. And so one of the things that you really want to focus on here is developing your taste, your ability, your style as a writer. Otherwise, somebody's going to say, oh, your style is AI. And that makes you a commodity. That doesn't make you unique. This is actually why I'm more bullish on a bunch of writers in Hollywood right now. The really good writers have that touch and feel that just can't be replaced. Generic content that's sort of goofy and Instagram kind of worthy, yeah, that's probably going to go away. But better stuff, develop that touch and feel. And all the designers, all the stuff that I've seen, we swung away from it, and now we swung pretty hard back to getting those people back into organizations and empowering them.
So another take on that is you could first, with your question, do the hard work to answer it yourself, then have the AI chime in, compare notes, or the reverse. Go ahead and prompt it, get an answer, but then check it painfully, line by line. Check the references, check the resources. Either one of those will keep you sharp, I think.
Yeah. Don't trust.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Rishi, and I'm a part of a club on campus called Project Lift, where we build like AI and tech tools for small businesses.
Awesome.
And we've seen this like same discrepancy that you were talking about, where AI is advancing a lot quicker than small businesses and the general population is able to adopt it. So I was wondering what your advice would be to small businesses to sort of stay AI native and reap the full benefits at like the rate that it's expanding, and like specifically non-technical businesses.
Yeah, so this is where I have so much empathy for small, medium business because the margins are so low, they can't hire people to do stuff. It's the play, and the other problem is the weaponization of AI against them. You know, whether it's bots to pump up ratings or destroy. You know, I've seen some certain small businesses start to use AI to dump negative comments and comment, you know, their competitors or other things. The place where I think is like the thing that I think for small businesses to do is to honestly leverage groups like yours and like groups to come in. And I think out of that, we're going to see emergence of a new set of technologies, just like we saw Intuit come along with QuickBooks and other type things for small businesses. There's a whole suite of technologies, I think, that are going to emerge that say, this is your new AI stack, your new CRM, your new Square, that is going to empower in a different way the small, medium business. And by the way, I think this is, while the small, medium business is true, this is 10x more true for the nonprofit world and like safety net programs in other places.
So
I'll take one more.
20-second question,
Yeah.
60-second answer.
Sorry I don't have more time today.
Okay. Hi, I'm Leo. Quick question on in education. What would be your best advice to students at different levels, middle school, high school, college, on how they should be using AI in a way that they're still learning the skills?
Yeah, okay, great. Let's squeeze one more in, I'll answer them both at the same time.
Jerry Dantis, mathematics. The question is bias. There can be groupthink, or there can be whoever owns it decides it wants a bias.
Yeah, so the training program aspect of this, for what you want to do, if there's one thing overall for staying at the different levels, is just focus on play. Build a practice of playing with different things, doing weird stuff, trying random things, try as much as you can at the different levels, always be trying to push the boundaries. Look at what good looks like one level senior. If you're an undergrad, what does good look like at a grad student? If you're a grad student, what does good look like as a professor? Always be asking what good looks like, and can AI assist you on that journey? The bias question, we don't know how to deal with this. Like, this is the honest answer. People can give you all the answers they want. There's a version of it that I think is very academic and research oriented where we're starting to learn, and that's actually where a bunch of this work needs to be taking place. I'm a strong believer that more federal funding needs to go into this, along with joint collaboration with the large models to work on this at the base level in academia. The place where I think we also have to be honest is a broader societal question of what does what is the free speech? What does Section 230 of the internet look like? What does responsibility of our actions need to look like? And a lot of that's unfortunately all embedded. And it's embedded because at a policy level, it's gotten politicized. And so you can't just pull it apart in a reasonable way that would be otherwise.
Let's thank DJ again, please.
Thank you.